Hey, 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 Bulimia Freedom Fighters. It's Freedom Friday and we're doing our Q&A as normal. If you are meeting me for the first time on this channel, my name's Helen Bennett. I'm a coach who helps people stop losing control with food. I actually used to struggle with bulimia. So on Fridays, I do a Q&A on this channel specifically to answer all your bulimia specific questions. But if you'd like to join me on any of my other lives, in the description, you'll find the link to my other channel, where on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, about half an hour before this, I jump on just sharing general food freedom love for y'all. So today we're chatting about, I got a question today about whether I thought trackers and street counters were, like in AA, were a good idea as opposed to scales. And actually, I'll chat about scales as well. So we're speaking very specifically about bulimia recovery, but actually, I think this applies to anybody struggling with compulsive eating. I'm sure the advice would probably be the same. Look, ultimately, it's usually helpful for me to know your situation and to know what relationship you've had with trackers and street counters and all these things and the scale in the past. But let's assume that they've not been the best. Scales certainly tend to come with a lot of unhappy emotions because either we get on a scale and we're thrilled, but then we're stuck with the, oh my God, how am I going to keep this number where it is? Or we get on a scale and it's going in a direction we don't want to see. So it's scales, I think, generally, I used to say to people, look, just get rid of them. And obviously, if you're watching this and you're considering getting rid of your scale because you're so tired of it making you feel awful and sort of controlling your emotions for the day, or telling you what you can and can't eat, or whether you do or don't need to do exercise, then yeah, get rid of the scale. It was one of the best things I ever did. However, I understand that some people feel really nervous at the idea of not being able to use their scale. And I would rather you felt safe and comfortable and did all of the other work required to break free of that, those compulsive urges to binge or purge or restrict, which is tricky with a scale there. But sometimes ripping a scale away or ripping a tracker away can be so unnerving and leave people feeling so vulnerable or afraid of their own body that it can be better to leave it there. So I think the goal is for you to get to a place where you don't need trackers or calorie counters or scales or glucose monitors, because you've come to know your body so well that they're just boring and you kind of just rather not have them in your life. That's the first prize. And so I find a lot of people nowadays, when I work with people struggling with bulimia, will actually tell me, they'll get to a point where they just say, I stopped calorie counting, or I just stopped weighing myself. I just didn't want to do it anymore. It wasn't healthy. It wasn't helpful. It didn't make me feel good. And that's great, because I love when it doesn't have to come with pressure. So obviously, if you're thinking about it, by God, yes, get rid of it. But if you're somebody who just feels so frightened by the idea of not being able to tell, then I would suggest minimizing, slowly sort of weaning yourself off the usage. So if you were weighing yourself 5 times a day, for example, maybe you can just weigh yourself once a day. And then we could do the work to help you like deal with whatever headworms come up after you've got on the scale, or, you know, sort of all the good problem, you know, the good feelings you get. Let's talk about that. Let's understand where that's coming from. But I would say try and minimize it. So one of the things, I had a client not so long ago who was calorie counting, and she really wanted to stop, but it just felt way too scary. So what she did is she just, instead of tracking her calories all day, at the end of the day, she would then reflect on what she'd eaten and then tally it up. And what we sort of guessed at, our hypothesis was that over time, if she took the total over a period of a month, that it would probably even out beautifully. And that way she got to realize that even if some days it was higher than others, her body could be trusted. But the other thing that it was important about that is that she wasn't forcing herself to eat or not eat depending on the calories. She really tried to just take a deep breath and use it just as evidence that she was moving in the right direction, not as a guideline as to how much she should or shouldn't eat that day. Now, I'm not saying that was easy, and I imagine it was pretty goddamn scary if the number went up, or she was having a particularly hungry day. But, you know, I was holding her hand and we were very aware that there's some days in the month you're going to be hungry. And then she saw there were some days in the month she wasn't really hungry at all. And it was so lovely because it wasn't restrictive. It didn't require force. It was just effortless non-hunger. Her body was just not in the mood to eat much that day. And then there are other days, and as women, we know this, where we're just ravenous and we can't understand why. And it could just be hormones. And that's when we've got to be careful of letting those trackers trip us up. So ultimately, people usually get to a point where they're just fed up. Street counters are different. So street counter that this person was asking about is very much about counting the number of days that you've successfully not binged or purged. I don't like them at all. I do something a little different. I think it's good to have things that reward you, but because this can take a long time to change, and because you're going to make lots of mistakes. In fact, I've just shot a whole video about this on my other channel. You'll see it there today. You've got to have a good strategy. The mistakes are inevitable. And what a mistake looks like is slipping up. It means having days where you do binge or you do purge or you do restrict. And you've got to be resilient enough to keep going through those without giving up. But the problem with street counters is if you go back to zero, let's say you've done like 3 weeks in a row without any hiccups, and then, you have a day where you just couldn't hold on and you give into the compulsions. And then you go back to zero. The problem with that is it affects us mentally. It becomes so hard to be resilient when we've gone back to zero and we think, what's the point, man? I've just lost. People say this all the time. I've just gone right. I'm back at square one. I'm like, bollocks, you're not back at square one. You've got all that success under your belt. That's like saying, I learned 100 Spanish words last week, but today I got one wrong in a test. So I've just gone back to square one. I don't know anything anymore. It's madness, right? And yet the application of street counters from the sort of AA 12 step, which may well be valuable for some people, I think more often than not, creates such a sense of failure when you make a mistake or you have a slip up that people can find it hard to get back on the horse again. So I can see the value of them and the pride that they can bring, but I think the danger is that they can really affect this. And this, as we know, is the most powerful force that can get in the way and stop us from making progress. And in fact, if anything, keep us stuck in a slippery slope going downhill fast, just because of what's going on up here. So what to do instead of using street counters, I would suggest, there's a couple of different things you could do. I would definitely log your wins. Like, let's be honest, when I was recovering, I couldn't get through a day. I had to just try and get excited about getting through the first few hours. So, but I really did. I allowed myself, if the first few hours of the day had been hard, before which they were, then to get to midday initially was a huge achievement, right? So I would give myself credit for that. And that can look like tracking things with stars and, whatever you need. Smiley faces are lovely. Smiley faces on a graph for every day or everything you've done well. Use stickers, use emojis, use whatever you need to. Track it somewhere and make sure you're tracking all your wins. And I wouldn't track your failures. A lot of people are tempted to do that. Just track your wins. And another one that works really well is I had a client who had a glass jar and she'd put pebbles into the jar every time she'd had a good day. And she had a bad day, well, the pebble wouldn't go in. And that was disappointing. She got kind of addicted to the feeling of putting the pebble in the jar, but she didn't let not putting the pebble in the jar send her backwards. She knew she wasn't going back to zero because the jar was still filling up. Even if she had a few days of lapsing, she would continue to just, the minute she was back on, the pebbles would go back in. And it gave her such a sense of accomplishment to see the jar getting fuller. But also psychologically, it's showing you that the work that you have already done is still there waiting for you. It's your foundation from which you can continue to build. And the faster you get back on the horse and the faster you push through the compulsion so that you can get another pebble in the jar, the faster you break free, right? So that small action, that little dopamine hit of putting the pebble in the jar and seeing the jar progressively get fuller and fuller was a very powerful reminder not to let one day of not putting the pebble in the jar stop you from continuing to put pebbles in the jar. So use beads, use pebbles, use crystals, use whatever you want, use stickers, use smiley faces. Just start populating something with evidence of all your wins. And you can make them as small, as big as you want. Have fun. Have it like being, every time you get through a binge urge, you put a blue pebble in. every time you get a full day, you get a pink whatever crystal. I don't know, like have fun. Now, obviously, this can get boring and the novelty of this wears off. So it's something worth doing at the beginning to really get the momentum moving in the right direction. The hardest part with this is consistency of time in the saddle. So it's the effort and the time combined. And the more you put in the effort and the more time you put into this, the faster you get results. But we are limited as human beings by how much time and energy we can put in to making progress. We've got lives to lead. And so because there's an inevitable, it's just impossible to do it sort of overnight. So we've got to be willing for it to take the time that it takes overall to start to really feel that the compulsions are gone, you're feeling free, you're not having to be as vigilant. Your new way of eating, which is just easy and automatic and non-restrictive, and that you can trust your body, is all just starting to become very much your new norm, to the point at which it's your new neural circuitry. And that's going to take some time. The brain doesn't rewire in a super hurry, in a big hurry. So, well, I mean, it does, but only under very traumatic circumstances, not ideal, right? So we've just got to take the time that it takes. And the hardest bit is not giving up and to keep putting the work in. So finding things like pebbles and smiley faces and stickers to get the momentum, get you excited on the days when you struggle, is very powerful. And there's another thing you can actually do there is, let's say you've got your jar and your pebbles, and when you get to a certain, when your jar is full, you can have something that you're looking forward to, a holiday or whatever, some kind of reward other than food, probably, to really celebrate how far you come, even if there's still a long way to go. Why not allow yourself, when you get to X number of smiley faces, you get to X number of stickers, you've got this thing that you're really looking forward to gifting yourself with, a massage or whatever, like a special thing that you've been looking forward to doing. And particularly with bulimia recovery, because let's be honest, the amount of money that you were previously, we'll put it in the past tense, wasting, that was going down the loo or wherever, and the time, if you're over exercising or binging, it's just so much better invested. There's actual significant savings of time, energy, and money that can be invested in you. That's what's so lovely about doing this work, is there are actual quantifiable financial benefits to recovery that you can then give to yourself. And it's very important that you do, because one of the big things people struggling with bulimia the trap they tend to fall into is feeling they need to deserve certain things, that they have to be perfect before they allow themselves a congratulations. But actually, in this journey, the whole way along, if you're not being kind and congratulating yourself and rewarding yourself for a job well done, you can delay your progress. And worse, if when you have a bad day, you punish yourself. It's very common, and it never gets anybody anywhere. Now, you got to learn from those mistakes. I'm not saying you must just be like, oh, well, it didn't happen, nothing to see here. I shot a video on my other channel on Wednesday about this. Absolutely, spend time learning, acknowledge what happened, feel the disappointment. But going into a self-critical, self-punishing, mean conversation in your mind, denying yourself privileges or taking away rewards, is so unhelpful. Being firm in your commitment to learn and to not breeze past it and pretend nothing happened. Yes, be firm in that. Be very committed and disciplined in that. But there's no need to punish. So I would go with high level of reward. We want to have your brain like excited about the achievement of doing the hard thing, paired with when you don't make it, when something goes wrong, stopping long enough to get the learning. And if you don't know what the learning is, you need to be working with a coach. So speaking of which, if you want to work with me, I'd love to hear from you. You can book a link below for a discovery call. We're going to chat to see, so I can get a clear sense of where you're at, what help you need, if I can help. And if I can, we can chat about how that might look. And having a coach is so powerful because you don't have to waste time making mistakes. You will limit the number of mistakes you'll make, and your coach will help you be resilient. And your coach, if she's a good coach, or he, will keep you putting in the effort, putting in the energy, doing the homework. This isn't something you can just talk your way through. You've got to do the work. And then inevitably that time frame gets less and less and less, the more energy and effort you put in. But it's going to take the time it takes. And along the way, the more fun you can have with pebbles and stickers and thingies. And the less you can feel the sting of trackers and scales and calorie counting that's actually making things harder, not easier, the better. So take that information and use it as best you can. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to pop them in the comments. And if you ever like to join me for these calls on a Friday and send me your questions in the chat, I'd welcome it. I'd love to see you in the chat on a Friday. Otherwise, you could just send me your questions and I'll answer them as soon as I can. So here's to your freedom, freedom fighter. Have a beautiful weekend ahead. I know weekends are challenging. That's why I do this work on Fridays, to give you something to focus you, motivate you, listen to. If you have a challenging time over the weekend, why not just call up YouTube, put it on your phone, and start diving into some of these other videos to keep you moving forward. Maybe you're struggling with an urge. Sometimes it just takes 15 minutes to get through to the other side of that very intense feeling, to give in to the compulsion, to scratch the itch. Sometimes that's all it takes to start breaking the habit. So, if listening to a few of these videos helps you get through to the other side of a very intense urge and empowers you with some knowledge and information so that you can take better action. Because I don't make these videos to entertain you, right? I make them so that you'll take the action to get the results that you're looking for. And if you'd like my help along the way, just let me know. Links are in the description. All right, lovelies, have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you again next Friday. Adios.